Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander Score studio. Welcome to the show. How's your day been so far? Good? Good. Yeah, I mean, I think the last couple episodes I've been starting to drink more and more tea in this cup, of course, you know, the Minnesota cup. It's great. But yeah, it's cold outside, but it's a nice day, and yeah, things are already going wrong apparently while I'm recording right now. There we go. Screen just tried to reload. But yeah, things are going well. Can't complain. Hope your day's going good too. Let's jump into it though. So there's a brand new thing that you have got to try with all of your decks, and yeah, this thing is quite crazy and very specific to, you know, Commander players, where this isn't really something that maybe people outside of Commander would really understand, you know, the need for a tool like this, but it is a pretty impressive tool, and there's an entire article about it up on EDH Rec. I'll link that in the comments below, but basically, there is what is being called the hipster Dragon Highlander calculator. So yeah, and sorry, I had to look off of the screen a little bit to make sure I'm reading it correctly, and I'll put this entire thing up. You know, I'm recording my screen right now. Hopefully I don't screw that up. We'll see how it goes, but basically what it's going to be doing is going to be telling you how mainstream or how underground your Commander deck is. And let me just read the little blurb right here. Here we go. Are you an EDH hipster? This app tells you how mainstream or how underground your Commander deck is. It takes a deck list and looks up approximately what proportion of EDH rec decks run each card. It then sums out the percentages to give you a hipster Dragon Highlander quotient. If you want to know a bit more of the methodology, you can read it there. And the idea basically is you can take a screenshot of the results, you know, they show to your opponents and be like, hey, I'm so incredibly hipster, look at my deck, basically. So apparently 1,500% is basically the most mainstream you could possibly do. The typical pre-constructed, the typical pre-con is about 400%, but they range from 150% to 600%. The median EDH rec deck is around 463%, so just some percentages to keep in mind. 50% of EDH rec decks are between 347 and 571. 90% of them fall between 169 and 719. Anything less than 150% is legitimately hipster. So that is a pretty low percentage, apparently, you know, compared to all the other percentages we talked about. So what I want to do on this episode, and I kind of threw one of mine in beforehand just to kind of see, you know, make sure it actually functions and works and I'm not messing this up. Basically, let's just see how hipster my current decks are. I will say that I believe you need to have a legal commander, obviously. Unfortunately, my rarity deck is not a legal commander, because rarity is not a legal commander technically, though every single player I've ever played with, you know, against it, has been completely fine with me using it. I ask first, you know, but regardless, make sure that you are using this site properly, because, yeah, it will not really return anything on rarity. At least I don't think it will. So first up, when it comes to input method, and actually, let's see if I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this just to make it a little easier for everyone to read. I probably should have already done that. Mistakes are happening already. Regardless, input method, I'm going to do text entry, just the way I'm going to be doing it. You can enter a URL if you have something like Architect 2, just to make sure, so that could be pretty easy right there. But I'm just going to be, you know, copy pasting them from my lists in Scryfall right now. So let's go to my Joda list really quick. So this is my Joda Villainous Wealth deck. So the entire, you know, deck basically is all just, hey, make sure we can go get Villainous Wealth, make sure we can cast it, and copy it as many times as we can. So I would guess this is not a typical, you know, Joda percentage when it comes to it being hipster, because yeah, I would think it'd be more on the hipster side. I mean, there are certain Joda cards that this definitely utilizes, but yeah, I mean, most Joda decks don't just focus specifically on copying Villainous Wealth as many times as they can. So let's just see. So we're going to click Update now after we typed all that in, and we have certified. My hipster quotient is apparently 299%. So apparently I'm the 83rd percentile hip. So there's 17%, you know, of Joda decks are more hip than I am, I guess, is how I'm reading that. You know, let me know in the comments below if that's incorrect. Now, there is one thing that I did notice, and I'm noticing with this again, that I somewhat disagree with, but I understand. I personally, when it comes to hipsterness, I would probably take out lands in the consideration of that, because, like, Command Tower, yeah, I mean, I guess technically you are more hip if you're like, my 5-color deck doesn't run Command Tower. It's like, okay, good for you. Good for you. But, I mean, I guess that's the, you know, kind of like hipster minus lands is how I would maybe go about it. Not that I'm criticizing this, I'm just saying that, like, Command Tower adding 71% to every single deck that's running it is it's a lot, especially again when you say like in order for like a deck to actually be hipster, it has to be like 150%, so that's almost halfway there. Regardless, decently hip for my Joda deck, and again, I mean, I'm not all that surprised. I'm a little surprised because, well, because yeah, I mean, again, most Joda decks don't run, you know, the Villainous Wealth, you know, package essentially. Let's move on to my next one though, and actually I'm just gonna reload this every single time, and hopefully that doesn't mess things up. But yeah, I'm just going to reload this every single time and hopefully remember to change my input method. Next up, let's do Cody. So my Cody deck is completely built around, well, I actually have two Cody decks. This is going to be the Hypergenesis build, I believe. Let's see it here. Hypergenesis. Yeah, this is definitely Hypergenesis build. Okay, so basically, my Hypergenesis Cody deck is all about just... well, casting a spell that has a mana value that will allow me to get Hypergenesis with Cody, essentially, just off the top of the deck. So every single time I cast a spell that costs, I believe, 3 or less mana value, I will automatically hit Hypergenesis off the top. And when I'm saying spells, I guess I'm talking about instant sorceries. And then I just dump my entire hand into play, and my opponents do as well. But I've got some interactions that work hopefully better than my opponents have. But yeah, we're going to see what this one is like when it comes to being pretty hip. Again, I would think most Cody decks aren't built in this way, so I'm gonna say it's pretty hip as well. Let's see. So we're going to update this. 95% hip. So apparently 5% of Cody decks are more hip than mine is. And yeah, the hipster quotient is 179, so close to that, you know, value that they said, you know, 150%. So yeah, pretty hip, I think. Again, the top two in here that make it not so hip, again, are Command Tower and Exotic Orchard, making up over 100 percentage points. So if I was to just take those two out, it would be a very hip deck, apparently, at 79%. But yeah, again, that's, you know, a different argument for a different day, and if lands should really be included, because, I mean, obviously, I don't think basics are included in this. They really couldn't be in the calculation, but yeah. So, decently hip for a Cody deck. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of, you know, this, you know, kind of, it's kind of like a uniqueness score, I guess, for a deck as well. I'm pretty proud so far. I mean, not that your deck doesn't have to be unique or really always have to be unique, but like, I like to make my decks decently unique. And I'm not gonna, you know, take out Command Tower anytime soon or Exotic Orchard just to make them more unique, but yeah. All right, let's reload this again. Remember to change the input method, and let's go up to my Eseka build, which is another not so typical probably Eseka build, because with this one I am going to be built completely around. It's kind of like a hidden commander, essentially a secret commander. And that's going to be Ink Trader Nephalim. So basically, I mean, it is Eseka God of the Tree, but it's really, you know, the backside Prismatic Bridge is what I care about. And I'm going to just basically, you know, get Prismatic Bridge out, protect it when I need to. And then it's going to hit Ink Trader Nephalim, and then just cast spells that target it, that do some pretty absurd things. Like, you know, if there's 20 creatures on the board because of my opponents, I can make even more creatures. I can draw my entire library with, you know, a 1-mana spell, essentially. I can, you know, make treasures based on the number of creatures in play. It's pretty crazy what you can do with this kind of a deck. One that I really don't pull out too often, but yes, again, one that is probably not your typical Eseka build, so I'm going to guess it's going to be pretty hipster. Hipster quotient 293%, that's 84th% hip. So yeah, I mean, this one is decently hip as well. Again, you can kind of look through, like, you know, the ubiquity percentages, like, you know, okay, what percentages are using this? I mean, Command Tower, yeah, again, at the top, but also, you know, outside of, you know, other lands, you know, Evolving Wilds as well. You also have some ramp spells as well, like a Cultivate or a Rampant Growth, which do show up in a lot of 5-color decks, obviously. So when it comes to, you know, ramp, when it comes to lands, those are some heavy factors when it comes to the hipster percentage, you know, being pretty high for this one. Or, I mean, I guess the hipster quotient being high. You want it to be lower, I guess, if you are wanting to be more hip. But yeah, 84th percentile, 16% of Eseka decks are more hip. But yeah, I do think it's a pretty unique deck, doing some pretty unique things. And yeah, again, pretty happy with that percentage. Not that, you know, the percentage being high or low really means absolutely anything. It's just, again, something you can show to your friends for fun. And again, I highly encourage that you share this website and try it out yourself. I'll have links to it in the description below. Let's keep going. Next up, I've got my Hotline Fling deck, named after Hotline Bling. You know, that Drake song from a long time ago with the incredible music video. Someone joking. Drake fans out there, I'm sure you love it too. So let's go with Mr. Orfeo. That is the commander for the deck. I'm just trying to find it real quick to make sure I take it out of the 99 and into the command zone. Again, if you've got the link to your deck, just in something like Architect, it makes it a little bit easier. So you can just do that right there. But since I'm doing the text entry, this one, if I had to guess out of all my decks, this one probably has the the highest hipster quotient. It is the least hipster out of all of them because I think a lot of Mr. Orfeo builds are pretty similar in some ways. Hey, get some big creatures out, double their, power, that kind of stuff. I'm sure there's some different, different small changes that can be had in there. I mean, and there's different directions that you really could take it, but I'd say that this is my least unique deck compared to the other ones so far. So if I had to guess where the hipster quotient is going to be on this one, yeah, 354% hipster quotient. That's 74 percentile hip. So it's still decently hip, though. I mean, like 26%, of other decks are more hip than this one. But yeah, there are a certain number of cards out there that many other, Mr. Orfeo decks are running. They're not all Hotline fling decks where they're just trying to fling, and that's probably where, some of that hip-ness comes in there. I bet fling is a pretty low percentage, I would assume. Maybe not, actually. I mean, fling does work well in a lot of them. Oh, there we go. Fling 0.9%. So yeah, decently low. But yeah, a lot are not focusing on, sacrificing your creatures and just chucking them at your opponents. Mine basically built entirely around that. So next up, though, let's reload this one. We're going to go Giganta Karuga. And I'm not sure, actually, and please let me know in the comments below if you've ever used this. I don't know if there is a way, actually, to include a companion or to care about a companion. I'm just actually going to keep my companion in the 99. That might, not be the right way to go about it. We'll see if I get an error or anything like that. But yeah, Giganta is the commander. The companion is Karuga. This deck, I think, is decently hip. It is all about, creating token copies of creatures with ETBs or effects or whatnot that I want to get extra copies of in play. And then, yeah, just, populating with something like Song of the World Soul, which is one of my favorite cards of all time. So yeah, the deck is built around that, essentially. It's doing some crazy things. So whether I'm getting extra copies of an Elvish Rejuvenator to destroy artifacts and enchantments, or, extra copies of Gary, Great Merchant of Asphodel, to drain my opponents very quickly. There's some pretty crazy things you can do with this. But I guess it's decently hip. So let's see. 280% on the quotient, 86 percentile hip. And when it comes to these 5-color decks, I mean, you're definitely going to have, I think, more, high percentage cards in there, just because, again, yeah, you're probably going to be running Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, if you're a budget player like me, Evolving Wilds, those kinds of cards as well, just because, again, the lands can add a lot to that percentage. Again, there's only going to be certain, apparently Great Merchant of Asphodel is a pretty popular card in Giganta decks somehow. Interesting, at 5%. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to kind of see the ubiquity percentage in different ones and kind of how it lines up. But yeah, still decently hip. 14% of, Karuga decks out there are more hip than mine, but I'm still pretty happy with that number. All right, let's reload this. I've got, I think, 3 more decks because, again, rarity I cannot use in this one, and I typically have 9 decks, usually is what I usually work with. Just that's what fits in my box, and also just easier to manage than doing a ton of them. Next up, Hoffery. So this one is a Hoffery deck that might, I don't know. I don't know how this one's going to go when it comes to percentage. Because, well, it is, probably not the 100% typical Hoffery build, but it is one that is definitely apparent. Definitely one that people can utilize, because this is kind of like a threaten Hoffery build. Essentially, you threaten your opponent's creature, you have sacrifice outlets so you can sacrifice them, and then get a token copy of their creature that's hasty and whatnot. So basically, you're kind of like stealing creatures, but getting rid of them, but also just getting copies of them that are better. So yeah, it is a build that is definitely out there. It's not one that's like some of my other builds that are like, yeah, not many other players are doing Hypergenesis Cody, but maybe they are. So let's just see where this one is at, though. I really don't know what number this is going to end up at. 295 percentile hipster quotient, 84th percentile hip, so decently hip, actually. Apparently a lot of players out there might not be doing threat and Hoffery. So maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just the mean person out there. But yeah, so apparently 16% of Hoffery decks are more hip than this one. But yeah, still decently hip. And as you can see, percentages again, it's not all that surprising to see like a Boros Signet toward the top and that kind of stuff as well. When it comes to, again, ramp and lands, that's probably going to be the highest percentages of typical cards that you're going to be seeing in these lists. But yeah, a decent, hipster percentage. I'm pretty proud of that one as well. All right, let's reload. Let's go back to the text entry. I've not forgotten that yet. I'm pretty proud of myself. Okay, next up, we've got Garth. My Garth deck, definitely one of my favorite decks. I absolutely love this deck, and anytime a new card is printed for it, I'm just very excited for it. It's not all that often, though, because Wizards really doesn't print. I guess I should say what my Garth deck does first. It is a deck that focuses on actually getting a land, an indestructible artifact land, and there's quite a few of them out there now, into play, and then just suiting it up with a ton of enchantments on top of it to make it tap for more mana, and then to utilize untap effects to untap that a ton to make an absurd amount of mana with a singular land. And yeah, I don't think that's the typical Garth build at all, so I bet this hipster percentage is going to be pretty high. Again, it is a 5-color build, so yeah, I mean, Command Tower is going to knock me down a bit on that, other, probably like rampant growth, that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, we shall see. Let's hit it. And the numbers. Here we go. 228%, 91st percentile hip. So one of my more hip decks, apparently. Not a lot of Garth untap out there. I mean, untap specifically for, a land. So yeah, apparently pretty hip. Again, 9% of Garth decks out there are more hip. And I bet, when it comes to like the very bottom, yeah, Juniper, Order Druid, Lay Druid, those, kind of janky untap a land creatures are not all that hip at all, or not all that hip, or they're extremely hip apparently. They got a 0% ubiquity. They're not used in basically any other Garth decks out there. So yeah, definitely a pretty hip deck in its own right. Let's reload one last time. Text entry. Let's go to my final deck, Felder Griff. This one is one that I bet is probably not all that hip. It acts like a standard Felder Griff deck in a lot of ways, where you're basically just, and again, I don't like to say some players, play Felder Griff and other commanders like it as group hug. I don't like to call mine group hug because I reserve the title of group hug for decks that literally don't want to win and just want to group hug, essentially. They literally just want the game to, either go faster or they're slower in certain ways and just kind of give everyone resources and kind of benefit all players. This one I like to say political control, because I do have an objective to win. I might act like I'm not trying to win. I might act like I'm just someone else's friend and helping them and giving them hippos. But I personally want to win, and I've got ways to win in there, and I believe other, Felder Griff decks out there do as well. So, see, I'm guessing this one's probably not all that hip. Oh my goodness. Okay, maybe not. Maybe I am very wrong, apparently. Okay, 156%. This might be my most hipster deck, apparently. I was very wrong. Maybe there's a lot more just fully group hug Felder Griff decks that I'm thinking of. Maybe there's not a lot that go that political control route. So I could be wrong on that. Yeah, 96th percentile hip. This deck I actually did build a long time ago. I think this is one of my first decks I had on the channel, like in the first couple months or whatnot. I made some small adjustments to it over the years, but not many. I don't even have Command Tower in this deck. I don't believe, actually, because at the time it wasn't kind of fitting into my, I think I was doing $25 exactly budget at that time. And yeah, Command Tower I think was around $1 or something when I was building the deck, or must have been. So I didn't use that, or Exotic Orchard. So that number definitely got knocked down because of that. Again, if those two cards were in this deck, this would be 256 percentile. So again, it's kind of crazy how much lands can influence that quotient and therefore influence that percentile hip. Again, the great debate out there of our time, of course, is should lands affect a hipster score? If you're trying to go super hip with the deck, then yeah, I guess. But yeah, I think maybe just put a little toggle on here to say like, hey, don't count the lands. I don't really care to see, if the lands are hip or not. Lands just, they make the deck function, essentially, right? It's not really, there are certain lands that you might add for flavor or for, other effects, but for the most part, it's just, making your lands work. But yeah, interesting, a very interesting calculator. Again, I highly recommend utilizing it. It's just a fun thing to send, and send to your friends and be like, hey, look at, here's screenshots of my 8 decks, or 9 decks, or whatever you have, and just like, here's, my most hip ones, here's ones that might not be that hip. Which of your decks are hip? What's your most hip deck? So yeah, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on this. Let me know what your most hip deck is and what your, hipster score is out of this. So yeah, I'll include the links in the description below so you can try this out yourself. But yeah, of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.